It's, as you know, Jack McEnany's got to pass some budget bills or something or fine. How many billion, Jack?
Well, we got fined $3 billion somewhere.
Yeah. The pharmaceutical one is interesting in that as taxpayers, you should know this, that there's 65,000 people incarcerated in the state at the moment. Maybe it's a little less. It's going down every day. They have pharmaceutical needs, so we have a pharmacy out there that actually provides for the prescriptions and sends it off to the prison. Saves an awful lot of money for the state. This new concept is to automate a lot of that and make that program available for mental health patients as well. So it's going to help the counties and towns with their jails. So it's a case of where government can work together with other entities, and we do it every day.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. Let me invite Dean Carter to join us. And I know we have a number of people in the room who have an awful lot of expertise in architecture and civic facilities. I won't quite say that this is the greatest collection of architectural expertise since Thomas Jefferson died alone, but I know that we do have some very knowledgeable people here. Jack McEnany, I know you have a great interest in these subjects. Ed Farrell from the AIA. Ed, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah. One observation and a question. First of all, we do have a statewide design awards program in New York State. We had over 200 entries last year, and they were just wonderful pieces of work. But when the dean was talking about the federal buildings, it sounded like a collaborative effort, integrated project delivery, maybe design build. And I wanted to ask the commissioner, or perhaps Jim, what would it be like if you were not constrained by the laws as they exist in New York now? What could it do for these projects that are in the works if you had integrated project delivery and or design build?
Want me to handle? I think actually there's a program this Friday at Albany Law. Going to be there. We would like more tools in the toolbox, if you will. OGS is unable to take advantage of some of these alternative service deliveries at the present time, but I think that for certain projects it could be a great advantage. Again, because you can bring the contracting community in addition to just the design community. The design bid build sort of segregates those components, and so a more integrated approach, I think, is certainly of value. We all know we want to bring a construction manager on board as soon as possible at the beginning of design, and commissioning at the beginning of design, and so certainly the construction component I would think would be of value.
I think we have the most strict laws to abide by of any state in the union. I'm not complaining about it. We are hung on the all things being equal, it's the lowest bidder. Taking advantage of some of these other delivery systems would be helpful, but this system has served the state extremely well over the years. The flexibility, we could save time, and I think we could save some money if we had an easing up of it under the right restrictions.
So the concept is that the lowest bidder requirement in some cases ends up costing more than if you did not have a restriction.
Well, I'm not sure, Bob, if it is. We have some devices when we were doing prisons. We did something unheard of. We put bonuses on the projects. That if you finished in, let's say, every day you finished ahead of our schedule, you got paid, I don't know what it was, $1,000, $5,000, whatever.
A little more than that.
Yeah, those little techniques that we can use when we have to. But I still am very close to the lowest bidder, all things being equal, in all of the things we do, because I was down in Alabama not long ago, and we were talking about how they did things, and I said, well, how do you do it here? I said, well, we call up the town chairman and ask him what he wants. Well, I hope we never get to that. I hope we keep it a level playing field. People know that when they do business with us. So some of these laws are good. We'd like some relaxation in certain phases of it.
Well, agree.
Question for the dean, or two questions. One is, when we talk about civic architecture, I think one of the major obstacles and problems since 9/11 has been security. And I think that's created within existing buildings and new buildings, a tendency to separate. I think Jack was the one who told me that the original Capitol had Hawk Street connection through the building.
24 hours a day.
Yeah,
Still
so
walking.
it was supposed to be open 24 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. Now it's secure, it's you can make it through, but it's a lot less difficult. In a slightly different way, the Green Building, the LEED certified and such, I'm not sure that they have taken the civic urbanistic dimension as much into their consideration. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, I didn't hear you say the word street. I don't know whether street, the word, like on the first two projects, it might have been relevant. But I don't see civic architecture until you really address and complement the street and make the street better and so on and so forth in the community. And because of the oil age, we just really have gotten so off of that. Whatever, do you see that coming back and to really have civic architecture?
I mean, I think just talking about your first question for a moment, the issues about security, are really daunting, I think, for administrators and clients and designers. But I think often it's possible to use design skills to find different ways of making things secure. So, for example, that San Francisco Federal Building, deals with those issues in a way that it's not terribly obvious, I think. But it's
At least it
certainly
separates it out.
Yeah. So I think, and I mean, your comment about the green sustainable design relative to civic buildings, I think is an interesting comment. But I do think that, just in terms of designing buildings that you can run efficiently, there is a civic response there, even though it's not a design response. And also you might think about materials that you might use, and they might also reference both of those issues about civic and sustainability. And then in terms of your other question about the street, which is very interesting, I think that in the last project that I showed, the Point Roberts project, for instance, it doesn't have streets, but it has freeways, it has parking, it has access for inspection for trucks, and a lot of requirements.
Well, that's not an urbanistic.
No, but the point that I wanted to make was that, they do think about infrastructure, which is streets, among other things, as being part of the design project. So again, I think it's a matter of trying to integrate those things together.
I also mean like the pedestrian.
But I would say that in terms of the pedestrian street, the San Francisco project is very responsive, because it's this idea about taking the childcare center and the restaurant out of the building and bringing them onto the street. And that they're available for people to use generally, not just for staff in the building. Programmatically, I think that's a very inventive thing to do. It's an incredibly brave thing to do for a client. But it is a way of activating that pedestrian square and those streets. And then, there are other examples, I think, in terms of the courthouse buildings particularly, that respond to historic streets, to traditional towns and so on, which, I don't know if you know about any of those other projects, but there have been an extensive number of courthouses built which are in cities responding to the issue about traditional streets. And so I think that it's very good you asked that question. I think that it depends on the project, but I think where the street exists, the project responds to the street. And the other thing I would say just about architects is that I think in a way they would tend to want to make a street-oriented culture in a building, almost sort of intuitively actually. So I think your comment is also interesting in terms of thinking about projects that, I think the Commissioner's comments about the project here, which is embedded in the city, and then something which is clearly outside, the designers just respond in different ways, I think. Sorry.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Bart Trudeau, and I'm an architect in local, in private practice locally, second generation, but Dan has been in the business for quite some time. And Dean Carter, I really want to thank you for a very inspiring talk. It was great. And I like the proposal and agree with your assessment of New York State as being a leader in the nation. And I just wanted to ask you, Commissioner Egan, who I've also enjoyed listening to many times over the course of my career, what's the viability of this proposal that Dean Carter is putting on the table for New York State? Could we have a program in New York State that's inspired by and greater than what GSA has been able to do? And
no
how should
reason
that
why
happen?
not. We could. It would take legislation, and you got the champion of good legislation in the back of the room. Yeah, it's doable.
What's it going to take to make it happen?
Well, you have the AIA here, they should get behind it. See, it's very difficult for us to sponsor legislation that might seem self-serving. So it's much better if it comes from the industry.
I mean, it is interesting, your comment in terms of the GSA program was really inspired by the GSA working with the AIA. So I think, you know,
It's
and then the other thing I would say is, you know, being a foreigner here, I mean, I was very nervous, I should say, about this discussion because one reason I thought that the sort of administrative networks in New York State, you know, seemed daunting, and I felt incredibly ignorant about this, you know. I mean, and so, but we were talking earlier with Commissioner Egan, and I mean, the idea that there is a program like this in the city already means that somebody has navigated that particular maze in a constructive way, which, you know, should be helpful for all of us if we wanted to do something like this, actually. So I mean, I feel encouraged on that front too.
we would endorse one set of rules. That's the biggest thing we have. There are other agencies. I was involved in the World Trade Center. We never liked those buildings. They didn't have to meet codes that we have to meet every day. And we think that requirement should be across the board. That's why our safety record is really outstanding. But if you know what I'm saying, the Javits Center is another instance. We were involved in that after the fact to examine the structural efficacy of that building. Spent a lot of money doing it. Because they didn't, as an authority, they weren't required to meet the same standards as if we were building it. We tend to build, I don't know if I dare say this, and we build super strong. And the reason we do, and it's like mechanical systems, for example, we know that many agencies will not have the kind of money they need for maintenance. So when we're designing switchgear, we over-design it. Mechanical systems the same way. And private people can build a little cheaper than we can when they're building a building on spec. Are we too still?
I think we've been known to be a bit conservative.
Yeah, we're conservative. But if you know that as an architect going in, you probably prefer that. I'm of the notion that so much of the problem we've got today in not having buildings that we can be as proud of as we'd like is that it's become commercial. It's become so commercial. The industry's become commercial. There's this race to have, you know, net square footage to grow squeezed down to a point where an architect doesn't have much room for the beauty you'd like to put in a structure. There's so many things that inhibit that today. And the government's not going to spend much money on new architecture for the foreseeable future.
We are almost at the end of our time. Professor Sternberg, did you have a question or comment?
First, a quick observation. I don't know if this is a myth or not. I went to Stony Brook originally, and after many years and other things, I wound up in Buffalo. I remember through those years, there used to be an observation about state buildings, but the brick. There's a particular colored brick you find throughout the state, a deep red of some kind. And the myth was that there was a state brick. And the state brick was chosen because it was sort of cheaper, that New York State had a special deal on that particular brick. Is that true at all?
Oh, that's a new one on me, a state brick. We did have New York State hardware at one time. When we put hardware on a building, it was hardware.
But does that imply that many of the state buildings of a certain period did kind of look pretty much alike?
I don't know. Give me one. The Donovan Building in Buffalo.
Right.
That's a good-looking building. The last administration sold it. That was a very attractive brick-faced building. Watertown is brick. Utica's brick. Binghamton. The infamous building in Binghamton. So the nature of an office building is you tend to have some sameness to them.
I have a question now, which is that I know throughout New York State, there is definitely, and Paul knows this, there's definitely a constituency for historic preservation. A strong constituency. It's not really statewide, but it's decentralized.
Some of whom I think are here today.
Excuse me?
Some of whom I think are here today.
Are here today, right. But as far as I know, there's no constituency for the legacy reliever. There's no, outside of the AIA, is there a public constituency for the good, for leaving good design for the future? I mean, you are Albany people, I wonder if there is.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, there may be, like in New York City, a Municipal Arts Society, there are some entities around the state, I think, that pay attention to contemporary design as well as preservation. But you're certainly right, it's not a great movement.
I'm Ed Farrell, I'm with the AIA. I think you're right, but I think it goes back to what John had said earlier, that there's not a lot going on. And what is going on is so constrained by the dollar. And what can you afford to do? And I think there's much more interest in trying to preserve and protect the good architecture of the past. And that may be a very sad commentary that most of the good architecture is in the past, not in the future. But John was right, there's a lot of, if you're building a building, a state office building, a lot of them are going to look alike, and there's not room for innovation, and there's not affordability to put in the extra things. So it may be bleak observation, but I think a lot of the good architecture is out there.
Don't ask me how much we're spending on preserving the Capitol, Jack.
Our final comment or question from Assemblyman McInerney.
On Friday, there'll be a meeting, and I'm here not just as an assemblyman today, I'm here more because I'm on the board of the Albany County Convention Center. New York is one of 2 states that don't have a convention center in their state capital, and what we have is very inadequate. Santa Fe is the other one. And the question is not whether Albany needs a convention center, but whether 19 million people deserve a convention center. So it's on a large scale, and we've been wrestling with design for well over a year now, working very closely with the firm that designs convention centers. And one of the things I didn't see in the 3 examples was a concern for compatibility with the community in which the building is put. It's usually on an enormous scale, which means that you can't fit it in neatly and compatibly. You run the risk of making everything around you look inappropriate, or trying to create something very false. And our plans will be coming out at 8:30 in the morning. Everyone is invited to 112 State Street. It's on the agenda of the regular board meeting for November. And some of the things that we have wrestled with, for example, downtown Albany is vertical architecture. The windows reflect a standing human being, and they're put there in the 19th and the 20th century. And we've had plans, how do you get vertical architecture out of an 800-foot long building? And so we've managed to break it up several ways so that you don't have that incompatibility of 800 feet of monotonous modern architecture. The thought of materials and whether the materials go in. We mentioned the brick here. In downtown Albany, the buildings are earth tone. That's why the Empire, that's why the original Knickerbocker Arena, we've changed the name a couple of times. And aren't we lucky that Preparation H wasn't the high bid? It's now the Times Union Center. One of the reasons why people don't accept it well is because the decision was to make it look like an airplane hangar by making it silver and gray. And had it been turned into something which was, say, tan and maroon, it would have blended in with the earth tone. So color is important and compatibility is important. I'm not sure that I was happy with what I saw with the modern architecture of all straight lines and boxy architecture. Probably my most distressing architectural experience, I went to Edinburgh in Scotland, and they had built the new Parliament, which is much maligned by the Scots by its cost, but also it's an ultra-modern concrete building. And I would not have minded if they had put it out. Edinburgh is actually surrounded by fields and Arthur's Seat, which is a range of mountains that everybody hikes in. If they had moved it out just a little bit, it would be a fine ultra-modern statement. They put it right across the street from, I think it's Maryrood, which is like the Buckingham Palace of Scotland. And it's directly across the street, and it clashes violently with Mary, Queen of Scots' house, which has all been done over in Scottish baronial. Compatibility with location is important. Phoenix, it doesn't matter. I've been to Phoenix. But when you get to San Francisco and you see the old building to the right, I'm not sure that that was convenient or appropriate to not in some way accommodate that design a little bit, so that since it's all basically the same governmental square. As far as the other thing I found was a problem is what statement are you making? And the statement of the entranceway to the United States, which is what the customs post is, was, to me, the statement was it was high tech, very metallic looking, when architects make the statement, it's honest. What they usually mean is they don't have enough money to cover over the utilities. They say it's more honest if we look at all the utilities hanging from the ceiling. That gives you a very industrial look. And I'm not sure it made a statement that, welcome to America, this is what we stand for. And I'm not sure that the simplicity of it saved any money. The cantilevered gas station covers, one that you drive under for inspection, the other one coming in the opposite direction, there's an awful lot of weight that had to be put on one end in order to have the free cantilever. So it's not that money was necessarily saved. I'm not sure what statement that makes or how the next generation 25 years from now is going to look at that building as what kind of a legacy it creates. If you're really into computers, maybe it's inspirational. I'm not sure it's American. And I would think a customs house, the gateway to a nation, should make a very different kind of statement. The other thing is with the brick, we rely more and more on poured concrete. I was very happy to hear about changing the composition of the concrete for LEED certification reasons. I think that's something everybody should look at. And I love the GSA's emphasis on green construction. But I'm not sure I'm happy at all with the design, and I'm not sure what direction we're really going with in design, especially when it comes to compatibility in an urban site, where I think that's really a mandate, or what kind of a legacy, what kind of a statement we're making. The building should say something if it's a public building. It should be different from just another office building. There should be some kind of a statement there that said, this is America, this is California, this is San Francisco. And I couldn't see any of that there. So anyway, I invite you all, come on down and rip us apart and see what you think. We've been working on this for quite a while. There's been heated arguments back and forth of what's appropriate. The back of the house is very practical. Most convention centers are a series of boxes, the 60,000 square foot exhibition hall, and then the 20,000, they can be they can be combined, the junior ballroom for more intimate gatherings, and then there's a reception area before. But the skin, I think, is going to be very important as to whether or not the public will accept the project. A project which Paul Gray doesn't like, and will write accordingly. And it's very important that we have the public buy in and say, that's beautiful, that's the last ugly part of downtown, and what a beautiful job they've done. If they don't like what they see, it's going to be very difficult to go to the state and get the rest of the money to build it.
Thank you very much, Jack. Any closing words from either of our speakers?
I mean, in defense of the GSA Design Excellence Program, I would just say there's just 3 buildings from a very big portfolio. And so, I mean, in a way, I was trying to choose examples that were provocative, that were different, that were in different parts of the country. So I think, I mean, it may be helpful to look across the range of projects. It relates also to the question about the street. So it's, in a way, I feel self-conscious about that if you feel that those projects are somehow seen as being emblematic of the program. I just really wanted to choose examples.
There's a great variety.
So I think there's room within the program to really make horses for courses.
Thank you. Well, we have had 2 fascinating presentations, a little discussion that might, who knows, might lead to continuing conversations between the AAA and the academic community and practitioners in our governmental sector. So thank you all very much for coming, and please join me in thanking our speakers.